All right, what is up, YouTube? So today I'm going to be talking about the May 2022 format post ban list. We had a crazy list despite the meta being only Despia, and that deck didn't get hit at all, which is kind of crazy as the deck was kind of dominating. It won the last 2 or 3 YTSs, and yeah, let's just talk about it. Before I get into the tier list, I have to explain, because every time there's a question about why is there a tier 3 in a rogue section, I feel like there is decks that are tier 3 that aren't necessarily rogue. Like, you might see like 1 to 2 tops of this certain deck compared to like a rogue deck, something like Earth Machine. Like, you won't really see that unless a good pilot is playing the deck. So that's just the difference. So let's get into the tier list, because I mean, for starters, the best deck of the format is obviously Despia. It was Despia before, it's Despia after, and especially looking at all the other decks that were hit, it was just insane that this deck is just, it's just still like really good. There was no hit to like the Fight for Engine, there wasn't no hit to like Super Poly or anything at all. So Despia is still like the best deck of the format. If that's all you came for, like, yeah, the best deck. Let's talk about the Prank Kids deck. The Prank Kids deck is pretty much dead. This deck is pretty much just unplayable at this point on the competitive level. It's probably trashed here at this time, but like I'll put it in the rogue section just for you copium Prank Kids players. But I just think Prank Kids, it was a 1-card combo deck. The reason why the deck became successful in the first place was because of the Meow Meow Mew, or at least, you know, post the Sevens era is when this deck became like super good because of the Meow Meow Mew. But yeah, this deck is just, it's just not as good as it was before. I'm honestly gonna put it in the trash tier. Another deck that was hit on the ban list was the Brigade Strategy. I think the Brigade deck, it's still fairly strong, but I think it's just tiers below the Despia deck, especially after the Verte Anaconda ban. So this deck is really solid as a deck. It's just not too crazy. You still have the Revolt combo, you still have, you know, Apollos and stuff like that, but with Verte Anaconda banned, it does hinder the deck a lot, especially. For next deck is Drytron. Drytron is a pretty solid deck. I'm not too sure what the combos are nowadays. I think the Megalith build is like the most popular thing. There was like a Scythe build earlier on in the previous format, but I don't know what Drytron can go for. Maybe it can still go for Scythe and stuff like that with the Megalith build, which could be pretty good, especially in the earlier format. Maybe it could possibly be tier 2, but I'll be safe for now. Put it in tier 3. I don't see too many Drytron players coming out of the woodwork, as Despia is probably going to be the best deck. The next deck is let's see, let's put this in like the rogue section. Like PK Brave it's just not that good. A lot of people thought this was going to be the best deck coming into the Brave format, but as we all expected, this deck is just way too bricky and it's kind of fragile. Even though you do have the Brave stuff to play around certain hand traps, it's just way too risky to focus your deck on Scythe, especially now that Verte is banned. Like, the deck cannot even Verte into, you know, Scythe combo. It just has, you know, the Brave stuff, which can protect the combos. I mean, PK is still really solid. It's just way too bricky with the trap cards. You have the Brave stuff that is also could be bricky with the Draco back, and the Faithful Adventurer is not really a brick, but you get what I mean. The deck is just not as consistent as people thought it would be. For the next deck, I think the deck that's going to be probably competing with the Despia deck, and that is Eldritch. Eldritch did receive a hit, but indirectly with the Cybert's Eldritch deck, receiving a hit with the Verte Anaconda band. That's pretty much it. I don't think Eldritch is too scared of that. They still have the Red Eyes package that they can play. They can still play the Branded package. They still have, you know, the Nadir Servant package they can play. They can just play the trap version with the skill drain and, you know, the floodgates. Like, this deck is still pretty solid against the Despia Strategy. It just has a hard time dealing with the Guardian Chimera that can be pretty devastating. So Eldritch is probably the best deck to compete with the Despia deck, but I feel like the Despia deck is on a whole other tier, probably even close to tier 0, boldly enough. Another deck that has been creeping up recently is the Dragon Link deck. I think Dragon Link has been seeing a little bit of play now that we have the Boral in Dragon. But then again, Dragon Link is still not a deck that is very strong. It's still pretty weak to Despia, especially with the new Dragon card we are getting in Dimension Force. That card is going to be really, really good against the Drytron strategy. So maybe people start playing that card if Dragon Link becomes popular, which is why I put it in the tier 3 section. But besides that, I don't think it's going to be that good. Maybe possibly tier 2, but we'll see. Another deck that I think is going to be really good is the Sword Soul deck. We did get a hit to the Auroradon combo. So no Despot 001 hit, thankfully. But we still have the Mo Yi, which is obviously really good. And we also have all the other Sword Soul cards. And we did get a boost with the Pot of Desires going to 2. So this deck is still looking very strong. I still see it as the second best deck of the format, as well as the Eldritch Strategy. I feel like these two are the best contenders when it comes to competing with the Despia strategy, besides like the newer cards. The newer cards, it's still determined to be a good deck against the Despia strategy. Another deck that was hit on the ban list was Sky Striker. I think Sky Striker is still pretty decent, but I think it's more on the rogue section, just like the PK strategy. It's just not that strong. They lost DPE, well, the Verte engine, which is like really, really strong for the deck. But I mean, they still have the Fusion Destiny package they can play, but it's way more brickier and, way less reliable. So Sky Striker is probably going to see a fall in representation, unless people start playing like Mystic Mine Turbo decks, which could be very, very annoying, in which like the deck would be like tier 3. But I still feel like the deck is kind of rogue at this point, because Verte into DPE was very, very important for the deck. Let's talk about the Adventurous Synchro deck. This deck is probably, I would say it's probably dead at this point. Like Red Rose was very, very important for the deck, but I do think like the Synchro deck, it's just not as playable as it was before. Like this deck is just not that good, especially with DPE gone. Like a lot of these DPE decks have lost a lot of grindability and longevity. So this deck is definitely not looking that strong. Fluanderies is another deck that's like pretty good, but again, they have a pretty terrible Despia matchup. It's not too terrible. Like the only terrible thing about the matchup is the whole Zombie World package, which is very, very good. But besides that, the Flunneries deck could probably compete with the Despia deck. It's just that one combo can be very, very devastating for the deck. We have a lot of decks to go through, so let's speed through a lot of these. Alistair, it's still like a rogue deck. Lunalights is still kind of a rogue deck. It's not really that good. Salaman Greats is another rogue deck. They got Circle to 3. It just doesn't matter. Like Lunalights, same thing. They got Tenki to 2. It's not really going to help Lunalights at all, because the deck is just not that strong as a combo deck. DDDs is a pretty decent tier 3 deck. I still think it's a very solid pick. It could be an off-guard pick for a lot of the players that got their decks hit, like the Adventurous Synchro deck, the Prank Kid deck. DDDs is a pretty solid deck. It does have a hard time with super polymerization, because you fuse away their fusion and their dark monsters to go into Draco Stapelia, which can negate your other negate, which would probably be the Siegfried. So this deck is pretty hindered by the fact that Despia is a tier 1 deck, but can still pretty much work. I mean, they still have really good combos, but then again, it does have a frustrating time against Super Poly. Even with the even without the Super Poly, it could be pretty hard. They could probably break your board if you don't have the Wave King Caesar card to negate their spell and trap cards. Another thing, Trickstar, still like a rogue deck. The deck it got somewhat consistent, but they lost Verte Anaconda, which is, a really, really good hit for the deck. Plunder Patrol. This is an interesting deck. I think Plunder could be a potential tier 3 deck. It didn't receive much hits, if at all, on this ban list. If anything, get buffed because a lot of these other decks got hit. So Plunder could be a secret tier 2 deck, but I'm not sure about the Plunder matchup, or not the Plunder matchup, the Despia matchup. Draco is still like a kind of a rogue deck. It's just like budget outlet at this point. Let's see what other decks. The Junk Synchron deck, it got Jet Synchron back, but I don't see this deck really doing that much. Is that it for all of the O decks? Adagnister could be like a potential like roguish kind of tier 3 pick to kind of counter Despia with the Towers monster, but then again, the deck does have a hard time against other matchups like Sword Soul. It does have a hard time against Eldritch. It has a hard time against Flunderies, but if there's a tier 0 Despia, format coming up, I feel like Adagnister could potentially be decent against those. Virtual World is still like a kind of a rogue deck. I still feel like this deck, after it lost not Virtual World, but VFD, the deck is just not the same anymore. It's not as good as it was before. Hero, still like a rogue deck. It's not really that good anymore. Zoo got tanky to 2, but the deck is still very trash. The only win condition you have in this deck is Zeus, and if you get your Zeus wiped or whatever, this deck is not that good. I think that's it for like the old stuff. And then adventure deck. I still feel like any adventure deck could potentially be tier 2. I'm not sure what people are cooking up. The spice, the goo for the Hartford YCS post ban list. So we'll see. So for the new stuff, Predaplants, I feel like Predaplants didn't really need Verte, and I still don't know what the deck can do. I know it has a lot of plays it can do with the new cards, but we'll see. It could potentially be tier 3. I don't see it being any more than like tier 3, if anything. Like I don't see this deck being like a deck that's going to consistently have like 1 to 2 tops, if any at all. Pendulums could potentially see play, but I don't think it's going to be that good. It's still going to be rogue. They got Monkey Board back, but I still feel like Pendulums could see play. It could potentially see play with Christian Halka-Fibrex into the Scythe play, because Dagda is still legal in the format, so it could potentially see play. But then again, Pendulum is still a deck that cannot play that many going second cards, but people are not playing hand trap, so at the same time, this could be a potential rogue or a tier 3 hit or a tier 3 deck, because the deck kind of does, what it does best is, comboing off, going into Scythe, going into Baron to, stop the branded in red. So the deck could be pretty solid, if I had to be honest. So Sun Avalon, I think this deck has looked pretty decent. I'm going to go with a bold prediction. I'm going to say it's tier 2. With these solid combos, with the Therion cards, it's really, really consistent. You have the Sun Avalon cards, the 1 card normal summon that it's pretty crazy. You have the Link monster that I believe can negate or steal a card. I forgot what it can do. I think it steals a card or something like that. You have the Trap card that can negate all face-up monsters currently on your opponent's side of the field. There's like many disruptions you can have in this deck. You also have the Griffin that can also be a negate, which can be pretty good. Punk, I think Punk is still like a rogue deck at this point. Auroradon got hit, so the deck, it didn't really receive a big hit, but there's still potentially ways to like play without the Auroradon package, I'm pretty sure, especially with the newer support in the new set after the Difo support. But then again, I'm not sure what this deck can do post ban list. Weather Painters is a pretty solid deck. I still feel like it's a rogue deck at this point. Like, the deck did receive like really good support in the Link monster, and I feel like the spell card, I think they got a spell card as well. The deck is just, it's a bit too slow compared to like these other decks. Even with Eldritch, like Eldritch, they can flip like Skill Drain, Rivalry goes in, and then shut down their opponent. With Weather Painters, it's kind of similar, but in a weaker way. It's kind of like, I wouldn't compare it to any of these other decks, but it's just like a slow control deck, kind of like Alter Guys in a sense. So I'm not sure. I think it's just Rogue at this point. Scareclaw, not too sure what this deck can do, but I still see some potential in this deck. They are getting more support in the next set after Defo, which is going to be really good for the deck. But right now, I just see it as like a Rogue pick at best. Exorcist is the same thing. They're getting new support in the newer set. POTE, I forgot what the name is called. Power of the Elements, I believe it's called. This deck is also going to be really good after the support, I believe. I'm not sure. But the deck can be really, really solid. Therions as an engine is like potentially tier 2. Now, that's the thing. With these engines, with the Brave package and the Therion package, they're just like really, really weird in a sense. Like, there's going to be some weird deck that some really good player is going to come out the woodworks, and I feel like one of these two engines, or probably even both of the engines combined, can be a very, very solid deck, which is why I put it in tier 2. You could probably just leave it here, to be honest, and like just leave it there. But I feel like there's probably potentially a tier 2 Brave deck and potentially a tier 2 Therion deck. Dynamorphia, I've seen something with the Dynamorphia deck. I still think it's a Rogue deck at best, but as an engine, it could be really solid with the Despia deck. I've seen that in the OCG. It could be played in other decks, like maybe even, you know, Eldritch. It could probably be played in like all of these other decks, but again, Dynamorphia, it only has that Floodgate monster in the trap card to work with. Other than that, the other card just seemed kind of mediocre at best. So the deck, not really that good. As an engine, could potentially be really, really good. Machinas with the new Therion support could potentially be good, but I don't see it going too crazy. Like, you have one negate out of all of the Earth Machine cards that are pretty decent. I guess you have the Citadel that can be really good for interruptions as well. But at the same time, I don't see this deck really being that good. Libromancer is still like a trash deck. It's a ritual deck that's not like Drytrons, where you're just like turboing out rituals and stuff like that, or summoning a bunch of negates. It's just not that good. ABC could be a potential Rogue pick. This deck gets really, really good with the Therion support, and ABC has always been this scary deck. Even with Union Carrier ban, ABC Dragon Buster is still like an insane card. It could win you a game alone. Like, the card just being able to regenerate advantage with it being able to tag out as well as being an interruption with the Therion cards could potentially be a high meta threat. I'm just not too sure to put it in the tier 2 or tier 1 category. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was informative enough. I know I'm not really informed on like the Dynamorphia stuff, the Foxy tune, or not the Foxy tune, the Punk stuff, the Predaplant stuff, the Scareclaw stuff, but I would say like the most, you know, meta impactful thing out of Dimension Force could potentially be the Therion deck, or any Therion deck engine could be like pretty good, as well as maybe Pendulums could see some play as well. But besides that, Weather Painter is probably gonna, you know, flop. The Scareclaw deck doesn't have that much support to be a solid deck. The Exorcisters, I'm pretty sure they're missing their good support that comes in the Power of the Elements, but I could be wrong. And then everything else I feel like is pretty solid. But yeah, I think Sun Avalon could potentially be tier 3. I think I'm probably overselling the deck based on what I've seen with the combos, but it does look like a very solid deck that can potentially compete with the Despia strategy. And then the following decks like the Sword Soul, Eldritch, Flunderies, I feel like these are still going to be the top 3, 4, 5 decks of the format. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you are informed on what the format is, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.